Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to you all to the first of our 3 ebook roundup events with our publisher partners. My name is Matthew Rice, and I'm the Regional Sales Manager for EBSCO Subscription Services and Gobi Library Solutions. So EBSCO and Gobi work really closely with thousands of publishers worldwide. And it's always a pleasure to provide a platform to our publisher partners to speak with our customers about latest developments concerning their ebook collections and ebooks. So today we welcome Cambridge University Press and Taylor and Francis. On Wednesday, the second event that we're hosting, we will hear from the IEEE and CABI. And then on Thursday, the 27th, we will welcome Oxford University Press and Wiley. All the books, ebooks, and collections that our partners will speak about are all available through Gobi and EBSCO. And obviously, last but not least, EBSCO always does have a prize to give away. After each of the presentations this week, we'll be asking a related question about the preceding publisher. The rules of the competition are quite simple. You need to attend all 3 events over the 3 days and provide 6 correct questions in order to stand a chance of winning the grand prize of R1,000 Take-A-Lot voucher. As Camilla said, just type your questions in the chat box and we will put them to the presenter during the Q&A session. We've left about 5 minutes at the end of each presentation for question and answers, and just put your questions in there for those to be answered. So handing over to our first presenter for today.
My name is Keith Mears. I'm Taylor and Francis's, well, until about 3 weeks ago, I was Taylor and Francis's eBooks and online sales manager for EMENA, Europe, Middle East and North Africa, with a watcher's brief for South Africa. We're having a mild reorganisation at our end just now. So currently, as of last week, my focus has been directed towards the DACH region instead, still with a watcher's brief in South Africa. How long that watcher's brief remains, I suspect will depend upon staff movements within region. But in terms of South Africa, I've covered the region for 5, 6 years or so. So I've got a fairly good idea of what's going on within the various institutions down there. What I was going to do today is not so much talk about new developments within TNF, but actually really try and work through some of the acquisition solutions that are available for our ebooks content specifically, and what the implications are for institutions and their acquisition strategies and their financial models, perhaps, and how things that we've done at our end have tried to perhaps massage some of the woes that might have been previously existed when it comes to acquiring our content. So in terms of kind of what I wanted to look at today, I'll kind of run through very briefly the eBooks platform itself, look at the kind of functionality that exists when it comes to the formats of the content. We'll look at a wee bit of kind of legacy, what I would term legacy acquisition strategies, the poles of the acquisition spectrum when it comes to either just-in-time acquisitions or more forward-facing strategic collection development, and then the implications that what I'll talk about has when it comes to data reporting, when it comes to metadata ingestion, and more importantly, discoverability. And then as a wee bit of a spoiler, what I would mean, or what ultimately I probably will end up is, or where ultimately I'll end up is Taylor and Francis content, Taylor and Francis platform. What I'll do first, if I can find it with all of the screens that I've got open, is put in this. Let's see if I can move this out of the way. this is pretty much going to be the starting point of the conversation. Matthew and EBSCO, as you know, a variety of solutions available when it comes to acquiring TNF content, or anyone's content, in fact. And those solutions, very broadly, from a publisher perspective, so understand that we don't necessarily have full visibility of what goes on at EBSCO's end. So Matthew, I'll leave you to kind of make any corrections as we go. Very broadly, either Gobi as an acquisitional platform, a shop frontage, if you like, a tail point, or EBSCO host as an aggregator ecosystem. The same with eBook Central from ProQuest. So what we've got here is a screenshot that Matt gave me, which replicates something actually that the team at UJ gave me a couple of years back. So for those not au fait with Gobi, I hope you will all be au fait with Gobi, but just in case you're not, this is a screenshot relating to Working with Vulnerable Adults, one of our titles, and the various solutions, the various acquisition solutions that are available for this particular title. And the thing that I want to draw attention to here is the bottom line showing the publisher platform led access solution, acquisition solution. So showing unlimited users, DRM free, for 210 USD. When we as TNF sell our content or make our content available to aggregators, to EBSCO, to ProQuest on aggregated platforms, that content changes. And by changes, I mean in terms of the access solutions or the cost price points. So we've got at the bottom 210 USD for, as I say, unlimited users, unlimited accesses, no restrictions on the number of users, no restrictions on the number of uses, no restrictions on printing or copying. If open access wasn't already a term, then we could describe it as being as open an access solution as you could get. When that title moves into the aggregator platform, that price point then becomes, as you'll see at the top here, a single user concurrency. So ProQuest eBook Central, single user concurrency, 210 USD. If you're looking for an equivalence when it comes to the access solution, price point goes up. So the price point there shown for the unlimited access, 315 USD. So with the aggregated platform, we have an impact in one of two ways. We either have an impact upon the access solution that's available, and that then is going to ultimately strangle some degree of usage returns that institutions will see from the content. And very obviously, you're going from an unlimited user access to a single user access, so a single user concurrency. Or you're going to pay more for the content in the first point. So your cost per download is ultimately going to raise. And this is the important part. If I were in the room with you just now, I'd be asking for a show of hands to indicate either the number of librarians who've ever had an awkward conversation with a finance team about acquisitions that have been made, or the number of librarians who have a concern or an awkwardness about the justification process for acquisitions, that sense of why have you bought what you've bought, and was that a good acquisition? Just last week, I was at Frankfurt Book Fair, and I was speaking with the acquisitions librarian from Qatar National Library. And every time I see him, one of the things he will always say, unerringly, is that he'll reference previous acquisitions that they've made, and he will say that was a bad acquisition. Now, sometimes I think it's partly for effect, but I also know that he's pretty screwed on when it comes to the numbers and when it comes to engaging with his finance team. So there's always that sense that he's looking to justify his acquisitions, he's looking to make sure that he's spending the finance that he's been given as appropriately as possible. So right from the start, I think it would help us to have a kind of open and honest conversation about the way in which content is available and how it's kind of then positioned in the wider library ecosystem. So that's my initial starting point, is to flag this up. I then said that we'll look at the TNF eBooks platform in of itself. And again, I've no idea kind of the awareness of the awareness levels when it comes to the platform itself. I should have maybe actually started with legacy content or legacy engagements now that I think about it, but nevertheless, we are where we are. Taylor and Francis, when I first joined 2015, had two distinct eBooks platforms. We had a STEM platform in crcnetbase.com, and we had a humanities and social sciences platform in TNF eBooks, I think it was called. It just goes to show how time moves that I can't even remember it. Around about 2018, we mashed both of them together into what is now taylorfrancis.com, which includes all of our eBooks content. So at this stage, we're talking around about 150,000 eBooks, and we have so many means of shaping and framing that content across collection areas or subject areas. My usual way of engaging with it is to note that we have 30 odd subject areas ranging from area studies through to veterinary medicine. I say 30 odd. Someone somewhere along the line decided to add in oddology and hearing sciences, but to call it really a subject area when it's only got 15 titles in it is a wee bit of a stretch. So I tend to ignore that one. Area studies would be actually usually my first kind of port of call when looking at demoing the platform. And actually appropriate for you guys because it includes within that area African studies. As I said, 150,000 titles which are currently available and are DRM free. We have around about 3,000 titles at this stage which are DRM protected. Those titles are available in limited concurrencies and are quite pricier by comparison to the DRM free titles. So we'll maybe look at them very slightly through the presentation in a bit, but in the main, the focus should be on the DRM free content. When the platforms merged, or prior to the platforms merging, there was an awful lot of verbiage around the content itself. The platform these days is much cleaner, almost to the point of being Spartan. So we're in a particular product page in this instance, principles and practical practice of teaching, some bibliographic information at the top, citation engagements, the ability to share the content should you want to, depending upon your socials, the ability to download or read online. Download simply downloads a PDF. There is no requirement at the end users end to have any additional software or any packaging on their devices. It's a very simple PDF download. We'll see how quickly it goes. Partly because we've got the Zoom session on, I suspect it may take a wee while. No, it's moving pretty quickly. Okay, so there we go. So we're into the title there, and it's just simply a case of scrolling through it. So nothing complex, and then the ability for the user to download onto device. Alternatively, there's the read online functionality, which is provided by Cortext. The Cortext read online functionality actually in some respects gives a higher degree of functionality for the end user. As a caveat to that, they would require a sign-on to the platform in and of itself. Once they've got that sign-on, that then allows them to look at things like adding notes, highlighting, all the kind of functions that you would expect if you're within a mechanism where the reader is kind of registered. So read online or download functionality. There's also fuller details of the title when it comes to things like the abstract or the table of content itself. This is quite an important part because especially when the humanities platform existed, content was only available at that full download piece. So you could only ever engage with the title in its entirety. The STEM platform was different. It allowed for a download individual chapter, and the platform as it is these days allows for both. So you've got within this 10 chapters that can each be individually downloaded. You can also engage with the abstract on its own. Bear in mind that will have implications for usage returns, and we'll maybe get onto that or reference that kind of slightly later on. Just on that point though, it can sometimes mean that it gets a mild blurring of institutions' understandings of how they engage with the platform. We had an institution in the Middle East when we moved platform who'd previously been using the STEM platform. So we'd been seeing usage that was derived wholly off of individual chapter downloads. When they moved across to the new platform, they could not get their head around the notion that their user experience had altered, their user habits had changed, that instead of having to download every single chapter and then do whatever they needed to do to knit them together, the users very quickly migrated to that full download functionality. So from the institution's end, what they saw was a perceived real cratering of usage returns. They really struggled to get their head around the fact that the usage that existed previously off of that individual chapter engagement, individual chapterized engagement, had then suddenly moved to this kind of immediate one-stop shop of download. It took a long time to kind of walk them through just exactly what the implications were for that. I wouldn't say they were entirely over the moon at the notion from the start, but eventually they got their head around it. So just be aware of that. We'll touch on that when I come to something later when it comes to data returns. Anyway, DRM free, DRM protected. I'll park DRM protected at this time because it's such a small percentage of the content. It's around about, what did I say, 3,000 titles after 150,000, so 0.1%, 2%, sorry. Not something that libraries massively engage with. If I can put it this way, I was out seeing Faith at University of Johannesburg maybe about 4 or 5 weeks back. And we talked about some of the DRM protected titles there, and she very bluntly said to me, as is her way, that the library is not positioning itself as a textbook repository. And the DRM protected titles that exist on our platform are pretty much our 101 textbooks. So they're not anything that would normally be classified as a monograph or a research monograph. Usually titles that would appear in class set adoptions, things like that, and usually again then things that have more than likely been provided as vital source codes or as physical print editions to the students directly or by the students themselves. The next part I wanted to talk about was this kind of circa 2010, possibly slightly earlier, possibly slightly later, libraries' engagements with our content and what I would view really as kind of legacy acquisition solutions. But legacy acquisition solutions that I've got a funny feeling probably still exist to some degree or not, and possibly even quite highly within the Southern African institutions. So that's the aggregator ecosystems, as noted earlier, with EBSCOhost and eBooks Central. If institutions had come to us, and by that I mean us publishers, maybe around about anywhere between 2005, 2013, 14, something like that, and asked about eBooks, more than likely what would have happened was they would have been pointed back towards eBury or towards EBSCO, towards the aggregated solutions that were available. And very simply because, certainly from Taylor and Francis' perspective, we hadn't turned our attention to kind of organizing the eBooks offering from our end yet. It was all about journals. It was all about trying to make sure that the journals solutions that we had available to the marketplace were as appropriate as they could be and efficient as they could be. eBooks, I think it's probably a truism for most publishers, were a much smaller component when it comes to balancing off the revenue returns. That journals were where the attention needed to go in the first instance. So, as I said, if an institution came directly to the publisher in the early 2010s, then more than likely eBury or a centralized aggregated ecosystem would have been proposed by the publisher as a means for engaging with our content. As I've just noted, it took for us till around about 2 events. 2015, we made the vast majority of our content DRM free, and that's when a lot of institutions began to sit up and pay attention. But even then, it probably took for the amalgamation of our platforms onto one platform for that to begin to be an efficient and useful mechanism for clients to engage with our content. So aggregator ecosystems means that in some way, shape or form, there is likely to be content that exists within those ecosystems, which at the time was an appropriate way of engaging with it. But the more that we move through eBooks delivery mechanisms, the more that those solutions perhaps begin to be mildly problematic. That leads me into then a discussion on, or as far as I see it, my outline of the poles of the acquisition spectrum and the implications that that has for institutions when it comes to the acquisition possibilities that are available just now. And I mean that both in terms of the content solutions and in terms of the acquisition mechanisms. So as far as I see it, you've got the two poles. You've got just-in-time acquisition possibilities. So the likes of Gobi, if we're talking about ProQuest, Oasis or Rialto, our own eBooks platform has a self-service functionality within it as well. Usually, I think we would style it as acquisition selection being made by faculty, basically reader requests, right? Things where the acquisition team are geared towards a really effective and efficient mechanism for very, very quick, high frequency, low volume acquisitions. So, dear readers, tell us what you would like us to buy, and we will buy it for you, and access will be made as quickly as it can be. And that will usually be within maximum a couple of hours, something like that. So that just in time, that requirement that you've had a request and the request is dealt with as effectively and efficiently as it can be. At the other end of the spectrum, what I've termed kind of forward-facing strategic collection development. So usually larger, but way less frequent. And usually in reality, we're talking about something that's either done at the start of the year because it's been planned through and the finance has been allotted to it, so get it moving, or something that's done at the end of towards the end of the financial year, where there's that sense of, okay, we've now got an understanding of kind of some monies that perhaps are remaining that we know we need to use, and we know we've got a couple of projects lined up that might benefit from that spend. If I would give an example of the two marketplaces that kind of typify both of those, I would say that the UK marketplace tends towards, or the UK and Northern European, so the Scandinavian marketplaces especially, tend towards that just-in-time acquisition. So really, really reactive, but very, very efficient in terms of getting acquisitions made. The German marketplace might give a good indication of kind of forward-facing strategic collection development, or a forward-facing strategic collection development marketplace, where evidence-based packages are used, where student satisfaction questionnaires and opinions are used to then either plug holes in the collection areas, possibly research considerations also used to maybe bolster collection areas. But it's a marketplace where there's quite a lot of importance placed upon the strategic development of large-scale collection acquisitions, rather than and it doesn't happen at all, or not very much at all, rather than that just-in-time acquisition, that reactive method. It's almost a case of, on the one hand, you've got, dear lecturer, tell us what you would like, and on the other hand, it's, dear lecturer, thanks for your email. You don't need to worry about whether this title is going to arrive, because actually it's already in the collection, or it's already scheduled to come into the collection. There are HR implications for libraries team for both of those points of view, and it's certainly not for me to tell any library on how that particularly should be managed. When I've talked about stepping away in some degree from those, from the aggregator platforms, and probably more towards the kind of Gobi-led acquisition solutions, a couple of things have potential impact on library workflow, again, as far as I see it. The first is on data reporting. I wouldn't say Matt, because Matt's been awesome when it comes to conversations that we've had in the past, and that positioning of Gobi and whatever else. I'll use it as a parallel. One of ProQuest's managers who exists in the Middle East, where for a good 2-3 years, when I was engaging in the Middle East, he would talk about the ability for the aggregator platforms to provide a really good level of data reporting. That kind of single platform solution was really highlighted as a virtue. There's actually two things within that. The first is that the notion that students benefit from single sign-on solutions, or a lack of proliferation of platforms. My counterpoint to that is that, and I tutored at Edinburgh for 6 years, and I'm aware that there's quite a wide degree of variation within student ability levels, but it shouldn't be beyond someone who's studying to be an astrophysicist, or a quantum mechanist, or someone who's looking at quantum mechanics, to worry about whether or not they can compute 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 passwords. And that in and of itself is actually resolved massively through IP engagement, or through Open Athens or Shibboleth engagement. So single sign-on solutions, or the ability for students to manage a proliferation of platforms, is something that I think perhaps these days doesn't necessarily hold water. The other part of it, the data reporting part, that sense that single platforms provide a mechanism for librarians and acquisitions teams to really quickly monitor engagement with content, does, however, have some degree of weight behind it. So what I thought I would do here is talk about something that we've tried across the past year or so, 2 years maybe even, to really improve upon, which is the level of data returns that we can provide when it comes to engagement with our platform. So this is something that I did for Matt just across the weekend, which is an overview of Botswana, PDF, PowerPoint led, something which hopefully should give institutions a really good understanding of where they position relative to our content. I won't go into too much detail about it, but very briefly, it starts at quite a high level when it comes to achieving or setting out an understanding of where an institution is positioned relative to engagement on the platforms, whether that's by total item requests, unique title requests, that differentiation between chapterized content engagement, full title engagement, and then denials. We begin to get a bit more granular, looking at the individual titles themselves. We begin to factor in usage engagements through the year, whether there's OA content, whether it's licensed content, then more granular again into the particular These are editorially defined subject areas at our end, blue being usage returns, red being denials. A better understanding again of year-on-year engagement, and of that year-on-year engagement kind of within that then specific subject areas and how they've performed. And then breaking down into those subject areas, the various types, the various positioning of specific copyright years, so that an institution really has a good understanding of not just where they're broadly using our content, but where they're using our content relative to subject areas, relative to copyright years. One of the benefits of TNF is that we've got a massive amount of content. One of the downsides of TNF is we have a massive amount of content. So we've really tried to build a mechanism across the past couple of years that allows us to better guide institutions when it comes to the particular content areas that we have, and that they perhaps should or shouldn't be engaging with. And then a couple of additional slides when it comes to just breaking out the subject areas. This part of the PowerPoint is particularly powerful for me, where you've got individual subject areas and how the total item requests and denials ratio together to provide total engagement. So in this instance, for the entirety of Botswana, social sciences is probably something that would need, social sciences or economics, finance, business and industry, areas that probably need some degree of investment when it comes to users utilizing our content or trying to utilize our content, but hitting a paywall, hitting a barrier because that content is not licensed. So that's the kind of data reporting. Very, very briefly, sorry, I'm aware that I'm kind of going on. Metadata ingestion and discoverability, that's one of the other mechanisms that is oftentimes flagged as being a really useful driver for kind of single platform solution mechanisms. And to navigate this, I'll talk about very briefly how TNF engaged with initially OCLC and how that experience has kind of helped us understand and provide mechanisms for institutions that should make, hopefully, librarians' lives easier. We engaged with OCLC in 2017, I think 2018 perhaps, to begin them providing our metadata processes for us. Prior to that, we'd used a handful of companies, and it was very, very messy. The enriched metadata was slightly problematic as well. So around that time, the decision was made to move across to OCLC. So we provide skeleton metadata to OCLC. They then flesh it out. That's the enhanced metadata. That sits not just within our platform, but also within WorldCat. That metadata sitting both within our platform and within WorldCat, the next logical step was to begin to connect those two processes together. So we have with OCLC what is termed automated content loading, where our platform speaks directly to WorldCat as long as the institution has made the connection. Nightly, a KBART is pushed out advising WorldCat of where the platform, where the content sits on the platform, or what content sits on the platform. So there's no need to upload MARC data. There's no need to then ingest it within your own library solutions. It's done automatically into WorldCat, and as long as the system is then connected through Bob's your uncle, it should be. Having had that in place with OCLC, the next obvious port of call was to then make sure that we were having similar conversations with, in this instance, EBSCO, but also with ProQuest, to make sure that EDS or ALMA or Rialto also had those solutions in place. So the notion of inefficiencies that might have existed previously at publisher-led platform level is something that we've worked quite hard to try and move through and move past. So long story short in all of that, there are cost implications and access implications, which ultimately give a cost per download implication for where our content is acquired from. There are data reporting and acquisition questions that relate to where our content is acquired from. And there's also metadata ingestion and discoverability pieces that relate to where our content and how our content is engaged with. But ultimately, through all of that, that's my final point, we're very much of the hope that if it's our content, that it exists on our platform. So that would be my kind of takeaway for you guys today, that if there is an acquisition of TNF content and we produce 6,000 books annually, 500 books monthly, so we're not short on content, it's more a case of how you guys and how institutions go about acquiring that content to make sure that the end user experience is the best it can be, and to make sure that therefore the cost per download is as effective as it can be. That's my kind of my spiel for this morning. Not necessarily a product-led piece today, and not necessarily a content-led piece today, but I hope it's been something that's given people some food for thought when it comes to engaging with our content. It's quite technically driven, so I appreciate that that might precipitate questions or challenges perhaps that might be against the status quo, but more than happy to answer questions if there are any, or to and I should say within the session now or post afterwards, just please drop a line to Matt, and he and I will navigate those as necessary. But I hope that's okay. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. So far, we don't have questions, but let me please share the question that we, just a second, that we have for our participants. Here is this question. So this is the question from Taylor and Francis. As of the beginning of October 2022, what percentage to the nearest 1% of eBooks content currently available from Taylor and Francis is DRM free? If you know the answer, please type it in the chat box. And of course, if you have any questions to our panelists, please also use the chat box to ask it. Okay. I will add this question to the chat box so you can read it again during our second presentation as well.
Keith, if that's okay with you, would it be okay? Can we actually send the presentation to everyone who registered, the recording? Oh, you're on mute there, but
yeah, I just realized. Yeah, of course you can. What I'll maybe do on that point, Matt, is I'll flesh it out and make make more of a readable presentation rather than an audible one. So yeah, I'll get that to you by the end of the week if that's okay.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Sounds great. Thanks very much.
No problem.
All right, I think Ashley's with us. Keith, if I can ask just to put your camera off. I think it might help Ashley with the connectivity possibly. Right, so moving on to our next presenter, Ashley Parsraman, who is the Academic Sales Manager for the Middle East and Africa from Cambridge University Press. Ashley, I hope all is okay on your side. Over to you. Looks good. You're just on mute.
Thank you. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, yeah, can see it. Just, yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. I'll start straight away. Well, second time lucky, and I do apologize for the interruption at my first attempt. Once again, thank you, Matthew, Camilla, for the invitation. I'm going to step right into it. And my focus today is going to be more content-led, as well as purchasing models for that particular content. And I'm going to be focusing on three areas. And the first area is our transformative agreements. We had in 2021 agreed on a 3-year deal with Sanlik. That's extended now to a 4-year deal, simply because we kept our prices static in 2022 in response to a request from Sanlik. The foundations of our offer, and really it's one that embraces open access publishing as the way of as the future. So our deal offers unlimited open access publishing. I think over the past 18 months, we've really been working very, very hard on converting as many of our titles as possible to accept open access publishing. I think at the start of 2021, we had just under 350 titles that out of our list of 400 titles that accepted open access publishing. 18 months later, we've moved on to just over 380 titles, 95% of our list, and that reflects our vision and our ambition to make sure that as far as possible, all our titles accept open access publishing. That might not be the case in one or two titles, but I do think a goal of 99% is realistic. In terms of output, it's been comparing 2021 to 2022. It's been fairly stable at this stage. But I think the one trend that I'd really like to pick up on is the percentage of total publishing that is now coming through as open access is increasing. And the next point that I want to make here is that your deal allows for those of you that have the deal allows for retrospective open access publishing. And that means that if a article was submitted as non-OA initially, and it does qualify under the terms of your deal to be published open access, our marketing team normally writes to the lecturer directly, and I would also normally contact the librarian on a quarterly basis with publishing sort of statistics. But the visibility is clearly your end as well in Agreements Manager. So I think, in terms of the foundation open access, Cambridge University Press, sees that as the way of the future. In 2023, yes, we are losing a few titles, but on the plus side, 2023 would see a net gain of titles for us. And I'd like to focus your attention on a new development, Prisms. And in 2023, we plan to launch somewhere around 6 titles in sort of very contemporary titles. We do hope that this offers further opportunities for academics to publish, with Cambridge University Press. A parting shot here in terms of transformative agreements is it looks like we're moving in the right direction, in the sense that since last year we've actually not only protected or at least kept current subscribers, but we've also grown the number of subscribers by 3 institutions. And I hope that means that they do see value in our deal, and that we are on the right track in terms of understanding the future of journal publishing. The second point that I'd really like to mention is, or the second issue I'd like to raise, is textbooks. In 2020, I think it was, yeah, definitely 2020, which was a very interesting year for us. And we launched our higher education website, and this is our home for textbooks for institutional consideration. And the business model here is annual subscription. we very humbly took to market 50 titles at that time. And just some of the features that I'd like to mention is for institutional purchase, so access, unlimited concurrent, offline reading, downloads and printing. I think last week we've just upped that particular number from 15% to 20%. So I think that's very important to highlight. And then the next thing that I'd like to mention is your the subscription is dynamic in nature, in the sense that any new titles and or new editions gets added on a monthly basis, and you'd normally receive an email from our support department with updated MARC records. Another very important feature that's also gaining quite a bit of traction is lecture resources in many of our titles. And that in a way is also the way of the future, that especially our new publications coming out, it's not just the content, but there's additional support for the teaching academic. So that is something that is featured on the platform. Going around and visiting you, I think some of the comments was, but actually we don't use all your textbooks, and why do we want to subscribe to 1,000 titles, and the package deals are too expensive. And I think over the past year or so, I mean, that is something that we took to heart, and I think our responses is to relook at pricing, and that is something that we've done, and to make sure, especially for those smaller institutions, that the pricing there is something that is available for them to consider, in the sense that if you were subscribing to 5 or 6 of our titles on that particular list, it might actually be something worth considering. And yeah, the point I want to make there is, since the start of our subscriptions, I think in the very next year, 2021, we actually had libraries that participated or took out subscriptions. And I'm very pleased to say that those that took out subscriptions as early as 2021 have renewed their subscriptions, and B, we've actually had an increase in people that are really evaluating our model here for textbooks. I'd like to, I'm going to move away from our PowerPoint presentation and be brave to go online and do something live. But this is just something, one of our absolute bestsellers in South Africa, and has traction throughout South Africa, and that's George Yule's The Study of Language. In 2 weeks' time, this particular title will come out in its latest iteration. So let me be brave here, Matthew, and yeah, let's see if I can get yep, here we go. So well, I'm just going to basically go to search, and I'm going to put in let's see where this gets us, and here you go. So the study of language, we're not going to go to all 500 results over there, but I'd like to bring to your attention that you can see that the 8th edition is set to come out in about 3 weeks' time. People have access to the 7th edition, and the 6th edition is also available for institutions. So if you have a subscription with Cambridge University Press, you will have access at the moment to the 6th and 7th editions, and as in early November, you'd also have access to the latest edition coming up. And if I were to click on the current edition over here, you can see that green particular access button there says that I have access to this title. I'm going to stop here and just highlight some things for you, and that is that you can see my screen here, add to an offline bookshelf. Now, especially to those institutions that do subscribe, you can basically not have an account, and the institution subscribes to our textbooks, and you'd be able to read our titles online. You'd need internet access for this, of course. So the first thing that we really encourage, and in our training manuals, is that users, academics, create an account. And when you create an account, what that does is it actually creates your own personal space in the library. And as such, you are then given a offline bookshelf. So there are two things you need to do here. And the one thing is that you need to create an account and then download our Spiral app. This then would enable you to get the full basket of features that I spoke about in that PowerPoint slide. And the first thing is add to your offline bookshelf. You will be given space to add books to your own little library or bookshelf. 20 titles is the maximum amount of titles there. And when accessing the book from there, you'd have the full spectrum of functionality, in the sense that you'd be able to note-taking, highlighting, bookmarks, etc. So I think that is something that I'd like to mention over here. Our higher education platform, home to our textbooks, and it has access. You have access to over 1,000 titles, and offline reading is a key feature of this particular platform over there. And just a comment on lecture resources linked to the files. Lecturers would need to actually, request access to those resources. It's vetted, and then we grant permission to those resources. So I'd like to just go further on. The next thing that I'd like to talk about is our reference material, and I'm not certain, our reference ebooks on core. And we have at the moment over 43,000 titles, and I think that that most of them are available on Gobi, and I think the pricing is basically the same. So you reference ebooks on core. I think there are two ways, and I think there are two ways that from experience people are actually purchasing or accessing our content. And the one way is a simple pick and choose model. So people would select on a title by title basis, so you'd get orders on a daily basis for these titles. And as a standard, if you're getting quotes from us, we should be quoting you at least a minimum of 5% discount, but that discount is dependent on the volume of titles purchased. The second thing that I'm really focusing on is our evidence-based acquisitions model. That too is something that is, I don't want to say gaining traction. I'm going to say that it's becoming a feature in the Southern African landscape, in the sense that those people that have embarked on EBAs, most of them have renewed or their EBAs. And the EBA versus a title by title choice for librarians. And I think, when is an EBA justifiable, and when, should you just continue doing the title by title choice? And I think, it's a reflection of historical annual spend. If you are not spending above a certain threshold, then the EBA, is pretty expensive. And not going to offer you the value that you would have hoped. Obviously, it's linked to usage as well, and dependent on the demand from your institution. But the one thing that I want to note about the EBA is, like your textbook subscription, EBAs are dynamic in nature, and that again means that on a monthly basis you'll get access to mark records with updated titles, I think from Cambridge University to press, our annual output is around 1,200 to 1,500 titles per year. So just, you know, rough mathematics means that your collection increases by 100 titles every month. What else? I'm going to be very brave again, and move away from here. Just see if I can. Yep, I'm going to just move away and go onto Cambridge Core. So that is our home, and I'm going to just fiddle around just a bit in terms of, oh, by the way, our content DRM-free PDF files and just simple download, and the downloads in our particular case is still chapter by chapter. Okay, so you know what we publish. I'm going to start here first. So in terms of our books, yep, I did mention about 43,000 titles. I'm going to jump straight into publishing partners firstly, and show you the screen, because Cambridge Core, our home to our reference library, is not just the home for Cambridge University Press content, but we also host publishing partner content. Amsterdam University Press, I think, and Bristol University Press are two more recent additions to Cambridge Core. Bristol University Press in particular, I've noticed, I'm not certain if the University of Edinburgh are on board here, but you know, I've noticed that people are pretty impressed with the African publishing list coming out of that. In the past, I think it's UJ, Facet Publishing, because it has you know, quite a bit of library management material associated with that. Intercensure, international law. And then, you know, sort of down at the bottom of the list, but definitely not least, is that we also have some South African content over there. Wits University Press has been with us now for about 3 years, and I think we started with about 60 or 70 titles, and that list has grown now to, and I think we're closer to, if not having exceeded, 200 titles. We also have UNISA Press on board as well. And just important to note that those titles are available. You do get access to not just the Cambridge content, but you also get access to our publishing partner content through an EBA. Just note that you know, we're extremely proud to have South African content on our platform, and you know, those titles could be purchased separately at much reduced rates to our normal pricing. Again, you know, just give me a shout on that particular issue. So that's our publishing partners. I'm going to go to collections and series because there's quite a lot to talk about here. There's the Cambridge Prisons for journals, Cambridge Law Report. That is something that initially we would say that you can buy the entire archives, perpetual access, so once off purchase, and I think we could split it over 2 years, and I think the price of that is around $40,000. We've changed that particular model, you know, quite a bit, and it's a lease with front list purchase right now at a much reduced rate. So you can have access to the entire archives in Cambridge Law Reports, as well as perpetual access to the front list titles, and at a much, you know, reduced rate there. So I think that's important. The other thing that I want to talk about is Cambridge Shakespeare. So I'm not going to be spending too much time here, but I'd really like to make 1 or 2 important points. So especially for those universities that are subscribing to, or at least that use our new Cambridge Shakespeare series, for example, all the plays are located here, as well as a lot of reference pieces. I think there are even, you know, there's even there's even content on videos in terms of dramatic works of Shakespeare. And the latest development here with Cambridge Shakespeare is that Shakespeare survey has now also been included in that particular package. So Shakespeare is a focus in the language department. Definitely have a look at that. And again, speak to Matthew, and we could provide you with the relevant pricing over there. So that is collections and series, and of course, nothing would be complete if I didn't mention Cambridge Companions. I was surprised to see that our Companions now is, I think, around 800 titles, and the Cambridge Histories. This is not part of the EBA, but could be attached to your EBAs as well, as major reference pieces. The last point that I'd like to make here, I think, would be Cambridge Elements. I'm pretty excited about this. I remember, oh gosh, about 5 years ago, introducing it and saying, Cambridge Elements, the content is sort of placed between a journal article, definitely longer than a journal article, but definitely much more concise than an actual book. And theoretically, this meant that the book could get to market at a much quicker pace. Again, humble beginnings. I think back then we started with around 80 titles. I think right now we have around 50 or a series. And I think I'd like to just click on the element series, for example, because so you'll see, for example, in archaeology, yes, we have quite a lot: classics, drama, theatre, performance studies. Yep. The points that I really want to get to is, I'm working my way down here. Management, and that seems to be very popular in terms of both the usage in the stats that I normally send out, as well as in purchasing decisions, and business strategy, corporate governance, leadership, public and non-profit administration. So those are the basis from which these elements are produced. So absolutely have a look at this. Elements in Grid Energy Storage, forthcoming. So it's a very dynamic space right now for Cambridge University Press, and a lot of our editorial energies are being spent on developing the series more and really adding flesh to the series. So from 80 titles 5 years ago, and I think now we have over 50 series in which titles are produced. So I'm going to ask you to have a look at that as well. But please note that in terms of an EBA, just in terms of our ebooks, let's just go back. Just in terms of our ebooks over here, this is what I'd like to emphasize, that you'd have all ebooks published by Cambridge University Press, DRM free. You're also going to have access to your publishing partner titles over here. That includes local publishers, and you're also going to have access to elements. Everything else that I spoke about, would be outside a standard EBA. Once again, I'm just very pleased with the uptake. Again, plus 90% of people that have taken our EBAs, the usage hasn't jumped by 100 or 200%. The usage has been astronomical, simply because you have access to just about everything on our platform, and there's no need to actually spend on research titles, because you have access to the stuff that we currently have posted, and you will have access to stuff that will be published in the months ahead. So there's a monthly update over there. I'm actually going to stop at the slide over here. We also have, apart from elements, prisms. In terms of ebooks, we've also created these categories in terms of good student, that will be research techniques. But then we also have growing sciences, like nano technology, machine learning, technology in society, petroleum science, robotics, etc. And that's really becoming a key focus in terms of our editorial vision. So yeah, I think in terms of what it is I'd like to present, those are the key issues, the key tenets that I'd like to focus on. I'm not going to go through this with you in terms of EBA step by step, unless there are particular questions about it. But I think that I would have mentioned it to most people already, and I think the model is known to people at this stage. Do contact Matthew or myself for more specific information regarding this. And I think I'm going to stop right there if there are any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. If you would like to ask any question, please use the chat, or I can unmute yourself. And in the meantime, I will share a question from our quiz that we received from Cambridge University Press. So over 1,000 Cambridge textbooks hosted on higher education page features A, limited downloads and printing, B, unlimited concurrent user access, C, offline reading, D, additional resources for lecturers, E, all of the above. Please type your answer in the chat box if you know it. I have added this question a little bit earlier, so you were able to reply it earlier. And with that, Matthew, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Camilla. Ashley, thank you so much for that detailed presentation. It's really good to see, that there is a growing amount of local publications taking place. Really heartening to see that the local content is coming to the fore. I think with that, we are pretty much done with today's session. Ashley, if okay with you, can we send the link to your presentation to all of those who registered? Would that be okay? You're just on mute if you are answering.
Absolutely no problem whatsoever. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. Great. All right. Thanks so much, Ashley. Keith, thanks again to you for a great presentation as well. Really good content that you both presented. Following that, I think we are pretty much come to the end of our session. If you have any questions about any of the presentations you've seen today, please just drop me a line. Myself, Keith from Taylor & Francis, Ashley from Cambridge University Press. And lastly, just to remind you that we have our second session on Wednesday, the 26th of October, where we will have presentations from the IEEE and also from CABI. And with that, I bid you farewell. Thank you for joining us, and have a good day ahead. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Matthew.